Good afternoon. It's a delight to have you all with us. You can keep eating, of course, but we're going to get the program underway. What a great day, what a great week, what a great theme for the conference. It's really special to see this conference and the Institute do so well this year. I say, coming into the room today, I had a number of you thank me for keeping this going, and I want you to know that I always appreciate thank yous, but those would be completely misdirected. Because the fact is that Tony Park, the chair of the board of the Frank Church Institute, every member of the board, Gary Wensky, they sat down this last year after the passing of Bethine, who of course was such a force of nature as I described her last night in keeping this going, and gave very serious thought to the future of the Frank Church Institute. And what they came up with is what we're experiencing this week and will continue to experience for many years. And we owe them and all of you a debt of gratitude for keeping this going. This is an incredible opportunity. Thank you so much for all you've done. There are so many people here that I could recognize, and I want to get to our speaker, but I do want to call attention to the fact that I'm really impressed. There's a guy here who's actually a Capitol High kid, went to Capitol High, he's an Idahoan, and he is the chief of the U.S. Forest Service, and he's joining us today. I understand he had a great presentation today. Chief Tom Tidwell, thank you so much for joining us here at Boise State. My job is to introduce Congressman Mike Simpson, and I couldn't help but think, knowing Mike as I do and the good work he's done, how appropriate it is for us here at Boise State University to benefit from Mike as a role model. Mike's biography is really an interesting one. Here at Boise State, we're spending a lot of time trying to bring students to the intersection of the arts and science and technology. And so much programming, way too much that I couldn't mention it here today, is directed at finding this intersection and helping students understand that the skills and competencies of tomorrow's jobs and careers are really dependent on that intersection of the arts and science and technology. Well, here's a guy, Mike Simpson, who goes off to college, obviously majors in the sciences because he goes on to dentistry, becomes a practicing dentist in Blackfoot, but then along the way develops this interest in painting. Not house painting, that is. But he's a watercolorist, and I'm sure many of you have seen his work, but it is really, truly impressive. And he's the kind of guy you just want to take on the road to help our students understand that we live in a world, if I can put it in Western terms, where one-trick ponies just don't work very well in the marketplace anymore. And the extent to which we can broaden their skills and their competencies, the better. And Mike is the perfect guy to do that. Today, of course, he's here to do something else. He's going to speak to us in light of this year's conference theme, which is Wilderness, America's Heritage. He's one of Idaho's leading advocates for a reasoned and balanced approach to protecting wilderness. For more than a decade, he has worked to protect parts of the Boulder White Cloud Mountains and its surrounding economies, as you know, in a way that has given all sides a seat at the table. And there's no question, it's a very big table given the broad range of constituencies with a stake in this debate. Along with farmers and ranchers, mining companies in the timber industry, hikers and mountain bikers, not always on the same side, by the way, anglers and hunters, ATV and off-road motorbike aficionados and horseback riders, wilderness lovers and big government haters. Congressman Simpson's Central Idaho Economic Development and Recreation Act is an attempt to build a coalition among these disparate groups amid little help at times from the skeptics on all sides, including some from our own congressional delegation. That's my editorial comment. In this era of polarized politics and government gridlock, Mike Simpson deserves credit for taking a pragmatic approach focused on finding solutions. Mike Simpson's political style has been forged through 35 years of public service at all levels. He was elected to the Blackfoot City Council in 1980 and began his career in the Idaho legislature 4 years later. He was the Speaker of the House in Idaho for 6 years before winning election to the U.S. House in 1998, representing Idaho's 2nd Congressional District. Mike Simpson is currently serving his 8th term in Congress. He serves on the House Appropriations Committee with assignments on several subcommittees, including Interior and Environment. He also serves as chair on the subcommittee on Energy and Water Development, a very valuable assignment for the people of Idaho. Congressman Simpson is a leading advocate for a new energy policy and a renewed commitment to research and development of improved nuclear energy technologies, including increased funding and research opportunities at the Idaho National Laboratory. Mike was born in Burley, raised in Blackfoot, lives in Idaho Falls with his wife of more than 40 years. Kathy, please join me in giving a warm, warm welcome to Congressman Mike Simpson.
Thanks, Bob. I appreciate that introduction. Last night as I was, wasn't the speech by Brinkley last night a great speech? Did you enjoy that? I actually learned something new there, and that is, several things, but one that was really important. When I was a dentist, and I was in dental school, before I was a dentist, I guess. And by the way, Bob, I didn't practice dentistry. I actually got it right. Before I go on and forget this, let me welcome the 200 students from Boise High School that are in the other auditorium listening, and welcome to this meeting, and thank you for being here today. But when I was in dental school, when you would study certain diseases and that kind of stuff, and you'd always notice that there were about 10 or 12 students in your class that all of a sudden came down with all the symptoms of those diseases. And, this was common. And so, you'd have students going to the doctor going, I think I got leprosy or whatever you were studying. And I always thought that was kind of weird until last night at 7 a.m. this morning, I guess early this morning, not last night, as I was laying there saying, I've got to get at least an hour of sleep. I remembered Doug Brinkley saying that TR had exuberance. And that's all I could think of. My God, I've got exuberance. So if I start saying, I so declare it, or bully this, or bully that, somebody just come up and grab me off the stage and take me to the hospital because something's going on. But I do appreciate the opportunity to be here. And let me tell you, let me set this up first. Let me make sure I got this all straight. You all know that I'm a Republican. Right? It's 2 weeks before an election. Where am I? I'm at a Frank Church conference, and the subject is wilderness. I got to tell you, I'm looking at my staff saying, who the heck thought this was a good idea? But all of you that know me know that I have a tendency to say what's on my mind. And I will tell you that scares the hell out of my staff. But it gives me some comfort to know that I have with me my communication director, Nikki Wallace. Raise your hand, Nikki, so everybody knows you're here. And John Revere, my deputy chief of staff from the Boise office here. But it gives me some comfort to know that Nikki's here, because I know that in her binder there, she has two things. One, a press release that's a fill in the blank. But the beginning of that press release is already written. And what it says is what Congressman Simpson meant to say. And she has Rocky Barker's number on speed dial. So I feel pretty safe about that. Let me tell you, a few weeks ago there was a dinner in Washington, D.C. celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Wilderness Act. They gave four awards to people for their work on wilderness issues over the years, their lifetime achievements on wilderness issues. I was asked to present one of the awards to a friend of mine, Tim Mahoney. I don't know if any of you know him, but he's worked on wilderness issues since way, way back. And Rick Johnson said to me one day when we were working on the Boulder White Cloud, says, you know, you need to get to know Tim. So he brought him in, and we met and became fast friends over the last 12 years, and I was very honored to be asked to give Tim this award. Now, the amazing thing is I go to the dinner, and there are these programs. And this is how touchy it gets for Republicans at wilderness dinners. There's these programs, and here's the pictures of the 4 awardees, and underneath is, you know, a little bio of what they've done and stuff, and underneath is the awardee who's going to give the presentation, and it lists their name and what they've done and stuff. And so the first 3 of them had that going on, and then was Tim Mahoney's picture, and underneath it said the awarder is special guest. I come to find out my chief of staff was worried that my name would be in this program with all of these enviros and conservationists and Democrats, and that one of my opponents would grab it and say, see, I told you about him. So that was interesting, but the funny thing about it is everybody saw this special guest and they thought, President Obama's going to come and give the award. And so I walked into the meeting, into the reception, and then into the dinner. And there were all these conservationists, all these environmentalists. Secretary Salazar was there, Secretary Jewell was there, Chief Tidwell was there, and others. There were a lot of Democratic senators. There were a lot of Democratic members of Congress, and me. It was truly a bipartisan dinner. And I got up to give the award to Tim. Again, I was very honored to be able to do this. And I got up to give the presentation to him. And I told the crowd a couple of things. One, is I said, when you saw that special guest there, I'll bet you this isn't what you had in mind. But the 2 other things, I'm here for 2 reasons. One, to present an award to a good friend who is deserving of this award. And the second one is to tell all of you that wilderness is not a Democratic ideal. It's not a Republican ideal. It's an American ideal. I'm often asked what got me interested in preserving places in wilderness. And I've thought about it often over the years. And to tell you the truth, I really can't come up with an answer. What I can tell you is that while some people can see Russia from their front porch, I was lucky. From my front porch, I can see the peaks of the Tetons. I grew up playing in the Tetons, in Yellowstone, in Redfish Lake, Bitterroot Selway Wilderness Area, the White Clouds. It never occurred to me that those places didn't just happen. How could Yellowstone have been a controversy? How could the Grand Canyon have been a controversy? We look at them today and can't believe that there were issues about that. They seem so obvious. But you know, their preservation took an awful lot of work. Those of us working on wilderness today stand on the shoulders of giants. Giants like Teddy Roosevelt, and as was mentioned last night that I didn't know, FDR and Ronald Reagan, and giants right here in Idaho, Frank Church and Cecil Andrus. It's hard to remember that without Andrus, we would not be discussing Boulder White Clouds as a wilderness today. There would be a moly mine at Baker Lake, at the foot of Merriman Peak. He's the one that saved it, and it's Idahoans that supported him when they elected him governor. You know, no word evokes so much emotion as wilderness, both pro and con. Because I'm not a writer or a poet or even a good speaker, let me read you just a few quotes of what people have said about wilderness that I find very revealing. John Muir, founder of the Sierra Club, compared the wilderness experience to basic human needs like food, saying everybody needs beauty as well as bread, places to play in and pray in, where nature may heal and give strength to the body and soul. Wilderness is a necessity. There must be places for human beings to satisfy their souls. Food and drink is not all. Teddy Roosevelt said, "There is a delight in the hardy life of the open. There are no words that can tell the hidden spirit of the wilderness, that can reveal its mystery, its melancholy, and its charm. The nation behaves well if it treats the natural resources as assets, which it must turn over to the next generation, increased and not impaired in value." Lyndon Johnson said, "If future generations are to remember us with gratitude rather than contempt, we must leave them something more than the miracles of technology. We must leave them a glimpse of the world as it was in the beginning, not just after we got through with it." And maybe most succinctly and appropriately, Thoreau said, "In wilderness is the preservation of the world." I believe that's true. That's why I work on these things. So why the Boulder White Clouds? It's kind of hard to explain unless you've been there, and I suspect most of you have been there, or many of you have been there. Unless you've been hiking with Ed Kennedy from the Forest Service, who's taken us several times. Chief Tidwell has gone with us, hiking into the wilderness. Unless you've crawled out of your sleeping bag in the middle of the night to do what people my age do in the middle of the night when they get up. You don't need a flashlight. The stars are so numerous and so bright, and you lay down on your back and stare at the stars, and you think how very far away they are. They look like you could reach out and grab them, but they're so very far away. And your mind tries to contemplate the concept of infinity. Those experiences are hard to explain to people. Maybe the best I can say is, I think when God takes a vacation, he goes to the Boulder White Clouds. The streams, the lakes, the forests, the mountain peaks are his cathedrals. And you don't desecrate a cathedral, you preserve it. So where are we, and why has it taken so long? Let me give you a little bit of history of CEDRA, the Boulder White Clouds Wilderness Bill. People ask why it's taken so long, and I used to say, if it were easy, it would have already been done. Of course, the implication there is that all the easy ones were done in the beginning, and now it's just the hard ones that are left. But that's not true. If any of you read Brinkley's book, you'll learn that it's never been easy. And it's always taken time to do these things. So while it's frustrating, it's just the reality of how it works. People have different opinions on what we ought to do with some of these areas. CEDRA was first introduced about 12 or 13 years ago. When was it, Rick? You're sitting out there somewhere. Oh, there you are. About 12 years ago? Yeah. He's got a copy of all the bills that have been introduced. It was introduced about 12 years ago. It's been modified some as we've worked our way through it, as all bills have been. In 2005, it actually passed the House. That was under a Republican House. Richard Pombo from California was the chairman of the committee. We passed it on suspension in the House. We got it over to the Senate. Nothing much happened in the Senate. But as you know, at the end of a legislative session, things happen. We put together packages of bills. And we put together the final package of bills. This was when the Republicans lost control of the House and it was going to be turned over to the Democrats in January. And so there were a lot of things that members wanted to do. We had a deal cut. Harry Reid was going to get a Nevada wilderness bill. It was going to be offset by the Boulder White Clouds bill. It was all done. And then at the last minute, Speaker Hastert, my Republican speaker, came in and took out Boulder White Clouds to put in a provision for a tax break for a company in Illinois. To say I was disappointed is kind of an understatement. But then we had 4 years under Democratic control, and I said, okay, we'll work with the Democratic chairman of the committee and we can get this done. Well, stories that you probably ought to write a book about instead of give a speech about. It didn't happen. And now we've had 4 years back in Republican control. We've had a resources committee that frankly disappoints me. The chairman of the committee 2 years ago, not this Congress that's just ending now, but the one before that, was proud of the fact that it is the first Congress since the passage of the Wilderness Act in, 1964, that has not added an acre of wilderness. They were proud of that. I wasn't. And there are other Republicans that weren't also. I will tell you, it's not only me that's been frustrated. There are several other Republicans, as well as Democrats, but several other Republicans that have been frustrated that they can't get some of these things done through a Republican committee with a Republican chairman. That'll change this next year. Chairman is retiring. We'll have a new chairman. I suspect it's going to be Doc Hastings out of Utah. Tough guy, but a fair guy, what did I say? Oh, Hastings is the guy retiring. Rob Bishop out of Utah. But Rob is a fair guy, and he's one that is willing to sit down and work with you. I've had several conversations with him about wilderness, about CEDRA. He's actually working on a bill in Utah right now. And every time an article is printed in a paper that talks about the administration wanting to do a national monument, I always take it on the floor with me and give it to my current chairman and the next chairman and say, thanks a lot for your help. I think they understand that this is going to get done. Why a wilderness bill versus a national monument? Frankly, I just don't believe a national monument is the way to go. I understand the frustration. It's been 12 years. But I believe that the Boulder White Clouds deserve the highest protection that you can give it. That's wilderness. The problem with a national monument is a national monument, although it's never been done, can be undone by the stroke of a pen. It's done by the stroke of a pen and can be undone by the stroke of a pen, and it doesn't allow for the collaborative process that we have done in our bill trying to address more than just a wilderness issue. We've tried to address the concerns in Custer County and Blaine County and other areas. We've got a trail in there that's going to, and a lot of those things we got criticized because those people that were opposed to wilderness always said, well, you always get the wilderness, but all the other stuff gets dropped out and everybody forgets it after the wilderness is done. So we've started doing those other things. There's a community center in Chalice. There's a community center in Chalice is there that was part of our bill. It doesn't need to be part of our bill anymore because we've already done it. There is work building a trail, a bike trail, from Redfish Lake into Stanley, which Stanley would like. We're working on that. We're going to get those things done. You can do that when you do the collaborative process of working together, trying to address a lot of different issues, not just strictly a wilderness bill. A national monument, while I'm sure Chief Tidwell and the administration will listen to the people of Idaho, there's no requirement that they follow what the people of Idaho want. They can write a management plan that says anything they want. You know, when you look at the 1906 Antiquities Act, it's an interesting piece of legislation. If you go back and read the debate that occurred in 1906 from the House Journal, which I've done, when Congressman Lacey brought it up, there were concerns by other members of Congress that there were no size limitations in here. They could be anything. And as was said last night, they were generally used to protect the cliff dwellings of the Pueblo Indians and the other antique relics that were being harvested, if you will. But he was asked about the size limitation. And Congressman Lacey said, "I cannot imagine a national monument being ever larger than 5,000 acres. Of course, TR kind of blew that out of the water when he did 600,000 acres in the Grand Canyon. Now, I'm not opposed to the Antiquities Act. I think it's important. There have been efforts in Congress that I've opposed that have tried to change it significantly. There was some that would require the governor of a state, if a national monument was going to be done, the governor of a state and the state legislature to approve it. I voted against that. But I would much rather do a wilderness bill and give this land permanency and the highest protection that you can give it. I will tell you, though, and I firmly believe this, that next year at this time, at this conference, one of two things will happen. The Boulder White Clouds will be a national monument, or it will be protected wilderness. And I'm going to keep fighting for protected wilderness. The other thing I would tell you is that if you believe that doing a national monument, you can then come in later and do a wilderness bill, you'll never get that done. That won't happen. It will be and remain a national monument. So why do I do this? It's hard work, it's frustrating, it's controversial. Make no mistake, I'm not doing this for me. I'm not doing it for you. Probably not even doing it for those 200 kids from Boise High School that are there. I'm not worried about the Boulder White Clouds being destroyed or compromised and its wilderness characteristics destroyed over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. I'm doing it for future generations, maybe 100 or 200 years down the road. Hopefully they will say, thank God that 100 years ago, when it was our responsibility to protect these lands, we did our job. And maybe some mother or father with their son or daughter will lay down in quicksand meadows. And look at the stars and contemplate infinity. That's why I do this. That's why you do this. That's why we must continue this fight, and we will win. Let me say just a couple words about someone who I consider a dear friend. Tonight you're going to have a dinner honoring Cecil Andrus. He wasn't always a dear friend. He was the governor when I was in the legislature. My first 2 years as speaker were his last 2 years as governor. And we occasionally had differences of opinion, as you might imagine. But when he left the governorship at his last State of the Union message, Bruce and I and some of the others in leadership decided that we needed to give Cecil something for his years of service to the state of Idaho. And we went and bought a glass cutout of the state of Idaho. It had the Great Seal of the state of Idaho on it. And thank you, Governor Cecil Andrus from, what was it, the 51st or 50th or 49th or 48th, whatever it was, legislature. And I remember Cecil was actually moved. This was a Republican legislature. And he took that glass and he said to us, he thanked us, and he said, remember, Idaho's environment is very much like this glass. It's fragile. Take care of it. So if any of you are going to dinner with Cecil tonight, I can't be here, and I'm sorry I can't. If any of you are going to dinner with Cecil tonight, tell him that I do remember what he said. I did listen to him, and I'm trying to do what I promised. Thank you all for being here. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you today at lunch. And there are microphones. Is that right? Do you want me to take any questions? This is where I really get in trouble. Okay, go ahead. Thank you. I thank you very much. It's not me. As Bob said, he gets thanked all the time when it's someone else that deserves it. It's all of you that deserve it for your hard work over the years on this.
If you'll go to the mics, then the students can also hear the questions in the other room, and we can hear them as well also. So, questions? Anyone?
Oh, here we go.
Thank you. Thank you for your remarks. I was fascinated last night to hear about President Reagan's approval of, was it 10
Yeah, so
million
was I.
acres of wilderness and 43 bills? So anyway, with that as backdrop, I wondered if you had any, if you could share any of your plans or thoughts on bringing getting the votes together for the bill.
I think we can get the votes together for the bill if we can get it out of committee and get it on the floor. If we get it on the floor, it'll pass. Now, we have to get it through the Senate too. And we're still working on that. But it's not impossible. We can do this. But it will take a lot of hard work both on my behalf and on your behalf. And let me say, since no one's standing up to ask me a question, and I should say this, I got to tell you in all honesty, Chief Tidwell has been a great chief of the Forest Service. I'm working with him on a variety of issues. One of them is the wildfire funding bill, so that we quit borrowing from all his accounts to fight wildfires, so that we can actually fight the wildfires, treat them as natural disasters that they naturally are, like hurricanes or anything else, once they reach a certain level, so that they won't be taking money out of things like forest restoration or hazardous fuels reduction or trail maintenance or any of those other activities that we want them to do, because they've spent all the money fighting forest fires. That's a strange bill to try to get through because it makes perfect sense. And you would think we got 242 organizations to support it, and about 140 members of Congress that are co-sponsors of it, both Republicans and Democrats, pretty much equally spread across the board. But we've got a budget committee that thinks all we're trying to do is spend more money on forest firefighting, and what I keep telling them is, no, I want to spend less money in the long run. And then we've got someone else who believes that the answer is cutting more trees. Well, that kind of makes sense too, because if you cut the trees, they're not going to be there to burn, so I guess. But they believe that's the answer, and they think that actually making sense with the budget will take away pressure on their side to do more timber harvest. So we're going to work that through. Believe me, Boehner is sick and tired of me being on his doorstep saying we got to get this done, and we will get it done, Tom. But thank you for the work that you've done as Chief of the Forest Service. You do a great job. Just a sec. Go ahead.
Thank you, Congressman. I applaud your efforts, and I know what a difficult job you have ahead of you to get this done. And that leads me to my question. I know in the past there's always been issues about getting this done politically, and it's been important to get the entire state's delegation together and be on the same page as this. In other words, if you're going to get this done and you don't have consensus in your own delegation, it's a lot more difficult to get it done. I know in the past we've had that, and sometimes we haven't had that. And I wonder where we are in that status right now and whether that was going to be a roadblock to getting this done.
It will be a challenge, let me put it that way. But I think we can get it done. As was mentioned in the paper the other day, for any of you that read Rocky's story, is that ultimately what it's going to come down to is you can make a choice. I'm talking about members of the delegation. You can do a wilderness bill that's developed in Idaho that addresses multiple problems, or you can do a national monument. But one of those two things is going to happen. Doing nothing is not an option. And I think the delegation will ultimately come to understand that. And I shouldn't say I haven't had any help from the rest of the delegation. Crapo has been supportive in the past of what we've been trying to do. I helped him or worked with him on the Owyhees, and we still have some work to do there in terms of funding some of the things that were in his bill and a few things. But hopefully we can bring this delegation together, and I'll continue to work on it. But with or without the delegation, we will get this done.
Okay, I think part of the reason that people aren't flooding to the mic is it's a little, the legislative process is a little confusing.
It is to me too.
Right. I mean, it's like trying to figure out how to articulate a question that doesn't, okay.
Yeah.
So my question is, with the present chair of your committee, is he ideologically against the concept of wilderness and the Boulder White Clouds, or what's the problem with?
They've been ideologically opposed to wilderness anywhere. Like I said, in the first 2 years, this was 2 years ago, they were proud of the fact that they hadn't declared one more acre of wilderness, and it's the first time that's happened since the 1964 Wilderness Act was passed. I didn't find that to be something to be proud of. But they are getting more and more pressure on them, and I think with a new chairman, someone that I've worked closely with on a lot of different things, and we don't see eye to eye on everything, but someone who understands, he was the Speaker of the House in Utah, Rob was. He understands the legislative process. He understands the word compromise. Unfortunately, in today's politics, the word compromise has become a dirty word. If somebody wants to call you a bad name, what they say is you're a compromiser. And you kind of look at them and go, isn't that what our Constitution is? Wasn't the grand compromise the Senate and the House? I've said this before at other places. The most amazing thing of all this is the most diverse country in the world. If there's a race, a religion, an ethnicity, an economic philosophy, a political philosophy found anywhere in the world, you will find it represented somewhere here in this country. And yet we get together, we elect people. We send them to Boise, to Washington, to the city council, other places. And we expect them to represent us. To expect them to represent us without ever compromising can't be done. Then you get the hell no caucus. And that's a problem.
Congressman, I don't mean by this question to deflect the energies of anybody in this room, or certainly you, from the White Clouds. But I think it's in the spirit of your remarks, and it's in the spirit of this conference, that to think long and think ahead.
Right.
Something that was said repeatedly this morning at the panels was, it starts with special places and people who care for those places.
Yep.
And in that spirit, I'm just interested, do you have any feelings or goals or intimations or ideas about other special places in your district or in our state that you are interested in trying to do something for if and after you accomplish in the White Clouds what we hope gets accomplished.
People have talked to me about the Pioneers. People have talked to me about Scotchman's Peak, other district, but generally you have to do it within your own district. You can't do it in somebody else's district if they are opposed to it. I don't know how that works out. But yeah, I've originally, when we started looking at this, we looked at Mount Bora and the area surrounding Mount Bora and stuff. So there are other areas that you can look at. This is not something that I want to do and accomplish and walk away from. I want to protect all special places. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Congressman, for being here today and for an outstanding speech and for all the hard work you've done. Since you've come to a room full of some progressive people, I hope this question won't be unwelcome. But recently, well, back in 2008, the junior senator from Idaho said that he would support your efforts. And then very recently, he has said that he broke that promise because unnamed liberals had distorted your legislation beyond recognition. But you never backed away from your legislation. So I'm asking you, did you continue to support legislation that had been distorted beyond recognition by liberals? Or was that a mischaracterization?
No, that's what I did. I said, man, this is... I said, wow, this has got so bad, even I can support it. No, actually, I don't know where that's coming from. When it was first written, the very first bill, we had talked to county commissioners, we had talked to cattlemen, we had talked to the ICL, to all sorts of people. And there were things in there that, ideas. And like most pieces of legislation, when you first introduce them, they have some things in it that you look at afterwards and go, maybe not that. And there were some parts of it that were problematic. And so we worked through the stakeholders that have been working on the bill, no liberals in Washington, D.C. And in fact, not one change has been made in this bill without the consent of the stakeholders that have been working on this bill. Nobody in Washington has changed it. Yeah.
Well, you spoke about the necessity for coalition, or at least this has been talked about in this conference. I wonder about the people in Custer County. What is their reaction to your proposal for wilderness over the last several years?
We've done some polling up there and a few things, and actually a majority of them support it. County commissioners have supported it, but the county commissioners have changed a little bit since we originally started it. But I still think you've got the county commissioners behind it in both Custer County and also in Blaine County. So, are you ever going to get 100% cooperation or 100% agreement? No. There's always going to be some people that are opposed to it. And that's, and frankly, there are people on both sides. When Rick and I first started this, I'm going to blame Rick, but when Rick and I first sat down and talked about this, I looked at him and said, Rick, if we're successful and get this done, we'll probably both be looking for a new job. Because there will be people on both sides, I will say on the extremes, that are going to oppose it no matter what you do, unless they get it all their way. I'm looking at trying to get that majority in the middle. And I think that's where we've got with our bill.
One last brief question.
Okay?
Thank you, Congressman. As a lover of wilderness myself, I'm just trying to gauge the type of people who are against it. Would you say that it's generally a political Democrat-Republican thing, or are there certain congressmen from certain areas of the country who may not be as welcoming to the idea of wilderness because of where they live? What have you noticed in trying to get this thing through?
I will tell you that, and this is a general statement, it's certainly not true of each individual, because there are exceptions to it. Most Western members that are Republicans are not really fond of wilderness. And I think part of that is because they come from a state like Idaho that's 64% federal land already. And it presents its own unique challenges. One of the things I'm trying to do, if you look at it, it's kind of interesting that in Idaho, and I've had this discussion with several of my eastern friends, we actually tax ourselves at a higher rate than they do at Connecticut and some other states. Connecticut is 0.3% federal land. We are 64% federal land. We actually tax ourselves at a higher rate and spend less per pupil than they do in Connecticut because we have so many public lands. And some people would argue, and that's why you see a committee of the legislature going out and looking at turning over the lands to the state and that kind of stuff. But I got to tell you in all honesty, people come here and live here and love this state because of our public lands. You want access to your favorite fishing hole. I don't want to turn this over and have it become private lands, and that's how the state would make money from it. That would bother me. And right now, the state couldn't afford it, frankly. I had CRS look into it, and it'd be about a $500 million deal to the state to do that. So, can the state and the federal government cooperate in shared management and some of these things? Probably so. And maybe we ought to be looking at some of those things. But you know, you all know Boise is a beautiful city. It's always rated as one of the top places to live. It's not, the mayor left so I can say this, it's not because the streets are paved better. Or any of those types of things. There are beautiful cities all over this country. But the reason Boise is so beautiful and the reason people want to live here is because of the access to the public lands. You can go skiing in the morning and play golf in the afternoon. Where the hell else can you do that? It is a beautiful place to live. But it's because of the public lands and the job that the mayor does. Anyway, I thank you all for being here today. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this, and I look forward to working with you on this very difficult and important issue as we get it done this year.